All right, y'all, I'm doing this a little bit differently this time. I'm doing a little before and after. I've never taken this exam before. This is the AZ500. I've never taken it. It's an intermediate level exam, so it's a lot more information than I have been talking about these last videos. So I want to do a little bit before. So I spent a lot of my time going through all the Microsoft Learn. It's a lot of information, but I did. I kept up with it. I got it. Not a big deal. I went through all that. I did a lot of practice tests. So, you know, I really had a strategy about it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit throughout this 10-minute cram. So I'll get you back after I take the exam. Wish me luck.
5 hours later.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What the actual... Man, I ain't even gonna lie to you. This one beat the brakes off of me. It was ugly. This one worked my butt. It was bad, but that's okay. I took it a couple times. I failed it the first time. That first time was ugly. That's all right though. That's all right. It was ugly. It was ugly, but I made it. So it was like 50 something questions, and like 6 of the questions were this like scenario where they gave you like this environment, these proposed changes. You had to like decide whether something would work and all that kind of stuff, and you had to answer those like 6 questions, and you couldn't go on to the rest of the test until you answered those questions. And you couldn't go back and like review your answers anyway. It was like its own little separate section, so you had to do that. And then you had to go on and answer the other questions. So you had that. So it was about 55, 53, 55, something like that total questions. So remember, y'all, this is a 10-minute cram. We're going to do this. I'm going to assume that you know some of the terminology, so I won't go through a lot of deep explanation of every word that I say, but you'll be able to pick it up. Don't worry. You got this. Play the music. So I saw a good 5 or 6 questions around the concepts of conditional access. So conditional access is part of that authorization process where if you satisfy a set of specific conditions, you can then be granted access to an Azure resource. And remember, conditional access only protects Azure resources. It doesn't protect the client. So if those conditions are like, say, if you have a compliant device, or say you've completed multi-factor authentication, or you're from the proper IP address, then you can be granted access to a particular resource. So remember, and there's all sorts of different session controls, grant controls, all that. You just know the concepts around conditional access. If you understand the process of it, you'll be able to answer those 5 or 6 questions. It's easy money, easy money. Lots of Azure Monitor on this exam. Lots of Azure Monitor. So think about Azure Monitor as this one-stop solution for collecting and analyzing data from your on-prem or cloud infrastructure. That can be, Azure, or even the cloud infrastructure can be Azure or even AWS. It can work in concert with Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Sentinel, but remember, they're not the same. Defender for Cloud and Sentinel are not the same as Azure Monitor, though it's kind of some of the actions they can do are kind of similar. So don't be fooled. Azure Monitor can be integrated with a ton of different Microsoft and non-Microsoft tools. So you'll query logs in Azure Monitor using this Custo query language. They like to ask you that question. Use Custo to query. In Azure Monitor, you'll need a log analytics workspace and a storage account and the monitoring agent installed to use Azure Monitor. Remember that. They'll ask you, it's bizarre. They want to ask you, what do you need to use Azure Monitor? Definitely log analytics workspace and a storage account. So the more data you collect and analyze, the more it costs. Remember that. You can analyze, visualize, and set up all sorts of crazy responses to particular events in your environment in Azure Monitor. And so you can set up these alerts based on metrics that you set or that you have, and logs that you can, where you can be notified of potential issues. That can be set. Those notifications can come through emails. They can come through push notifications. They can set up automatic actions based on those notifications. So Azure Monitor, really big on this exam. Let's go. You're definitely going to see on this exam shared access signatures. So shared access signatures are a way of providing access to a storage account. You can provide access to a user. It's time bound, it's granular, it's specifically delegated to a particular user for a period of time. And you're going to get a whole bunch of questions about whether or not this shared access signature can still work. So because they're tricky, because you can't just revoke a single SAS. You have to revoke the entire policy or update the policy, update or delete the entire policy connected to the shared access signature. You cannot just revoke a single shared access signature. So once it's out there, it's out there unless you change the entire or update the entire policy. Remember that. You're going to get several questions about SAS and whether or not one has been revoked and what particular actions have been taken to revoke a particular SAS and whether that should work or not. You will see Azure Key Vault on this exam. So Azure Key Vault stores, it's this Azure solution that stores secrets, keys, and certificates in a centralized, secure cloud location, so you don't have to store them on-prem, or worse yet, store them in your application code. So you can manage and log access in Azure Key Vault, access of your secrets and your certificates. You can know who, when, and how they were accessed. And so it's meant to simplify key and secret access across an entire environment. So you typically use a managed identity to access these secrets, or you can use a service principal, but generally you want to use a managed identity. You can enable purge protection and soft delete. You can remember these. This will be very important. Purge protection protects from accidental deletion of all of your secrets somehow. Soft delete is that little grace period you get when you delete something. It'll save it for 30 days. It's pretty fancy. So remember purge protection. Remember soft delete. Remember this allows for Key Vault allows for data replication and redundancy within region and across regions. Remember that. Azure Key Vault. All right, y'all, follow me on this. So there are three concepts you will see together in some questions on this exam. You'll see them put together in weird ways, but there are three separate concepts you need to know. Azure Policy, Azure Initiatives, and Azure Blueprints. As they are different policies, initiatives, and blueprints. Follow me now. So a blueprint is just like what it sounds. It's an Azure environment in a box. It's a way to deploy repeatable Azure solutions that, they comply with whatever standards you require. This way you don't have some random admin just going in willy-nilly and creating all sorts of virtual networks and servers and key vaults with no sense of order or compliance. So that's a blueprint. And Azure Policy is a collection of rules that help you enforce policy standards in an organization. So basically, if a policy has standards around how you create virtual machines, the resources they have, or the access they require, a random admin wouldn't be able to deviate and create something they want outside of those bounds. That is a policy. A collection of policies is an initiative. An initiative has policies underneath it. Initiatives are a collection of policies meant to serve a specific goal. So all of these policies are in service to a goal like security, or its applications, or whatever the organization requires. So remember, these three separate constructs: an Azure Blueprint, an Azure Policy, and an Azure Initiative. So initiatives are a collection of policy. A policy is a collection of rules and enforce standards in an organization. And a blueprint is an Azure environment in a box. Let's go. All right, y'all, so I can't possibly give you all the information that's going to be on this exam in just 10 minutes. So there's going to be stuff about Azure Sentinel. There's going to be stuff about Microsoft Defender. But what I'll do now is just hit you with some rapid fire miscellaneous stuff to get you some questions right. That can get you some questions right real fast, get you to that 70%. That's all we need right now. So, the exam's going to ask you something about setting up a hybrid environment, a hybrid authentication environment, or hybrid environment of some kind. The first thing you do is implement Entra ID Connect. Just remember that. That's the first thing you do. So whatever, they're going to ask you to match answers up and all that kind of stuff. The first thing you do is implement Entra ID Connect. So if you hear the word playbook, that's with Azure Sentinel. Remember that. Playbook is generally Azure Sentinel. So they're going to ask you about roles, different roles in Azure and different roles in Entra ID. Those are different. Azure roles are different than Entra ID roles. When you hear Azure roles, you're going to hear stuff like owner. You're going to hear stuff like contributor. You're going to hear stuff like reader. Those are Azure roles. Entra ID roles, for example, the ones I can remember off the top of my head that were on the exam, you're going to hear privilege role admin. You can create groups, do access reviews, assign roles to groups. That's a privilege role admin. Managed identity contributor role, that's an Entra ID where you can create, read, update, delete user-signed identities. User access administrator, you can assign permissions to resources. That's one that you're going to see. And remember, global admin is the most privileged, the most powerful role in Entra ID. You can do anything with that role. You're going to be asked about applications and what you need to integrate apps in Entra ID. You're going to hear about OAuth 2 apps. Just remember, OAuth 2 apps require you to provide a redirect UI. That's important. Just remember that. If you need to add another identity provider in Entra ID, you need to provide a client secret and a client ID. You need to do that. Just remember those things. I promise you, it'll get you question right. And this one, remember, if you want to integrate an application of any kind that you developed into Entra ID and into Azure, you need an app registration first. Remember that. Get these questions right. That's it. We're done. I know I went over 10 minutes a little bit, but that's okay. You're going to crush this exam. You're going to crush it. You're going to come back, tell us how you did. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.